Hi, Assalamualaikum. My name is Muhammad Nazif bin Muhammad Zahari.
Hi, my name is Muhammad Azrul bin Muhammad Zulkifli.
Hi, my name is Muhammad Fayyad bin Muhammad Hazzan.
Hi, my name is Syafiq bin Rizal.
My name is Muhammad Haikal Amir bin Rosdi.
My name is Muhammad Asyraaf bin Hamid.
Today we will be explaining about the second chapter of this subject, which is known as organization as a social system.
Firstly, what is an organization?
An organization is an organized group of people with a particular purpose, such as a business or government department.
From here, we can see that organization requires social interaction amongst people such as teamwork, friendship and so on for it to function properly.
So in this chapter, we will be explaining in much more detail on how an organization functions as a social system.
So guys, what exactly is a social system? A social system is a complex set of human relationships that interact in many ways. So, each small group is a subsystem of a larger group, which are a subsystem or even larger group. An organization social system includes everyone within the organization, from the pagat to the masjid cleaner to the manager and the bosses, and their relationship with each other and to the outside of the world. Whenever new people join an organization, they become a part of the organization's social system. So, a social system involves two main aspects, which are the social aspect and psychological aspect. So, social aspect includes social roles and status an employee hold within an organization. It could be formal, such as the working relationship between a manager and an employee, or it could be informal, such as the friendship between and other employees. Thus, employee can easily be influenced by their higher-ups and friends while they are part of the organization. Meanwhile, psychological aspect refers to the need of employee while he is working. For example, an employee has set a certain of goals he wants to achieve within the organization in the future, such as promotion, recognition, and satisfaction. This in turn will motivate the employee to do their work effectively and efficiently in order to achieve their goals. The behavior of each member of an organization will have directly or indirectly have an impact to the organization, as the member of organization depends on each other. For example, a manager depends on their employees to do their work properly, while employees depend on each other for friendship and motivational support. The social system of an organization can be divided into two main types, which are, in the form of internal social system, which consists individual and groups that may be formal or informal, like previously I explained about. It can be also in the form of external social system, which refers to the external environment organization operates, such as PR and aid campaigns for the organization.
Now we will be looking at social equilibrium or keseimbangan sosial in Malay. Okay, the nature of a social system with an organization is dynamic and always changing according to the environment. A system is said to be on a social equilibrium when there is a balance between its interdependence. They are interdependent parts. Okay, when changes happen within an organization, it may affect the balance of the social system, which requires adjustment for it to regain balance. Changes within an organization may cause two different effects. Okay, the first one being functional effect. Okay, functional effect refer to any positive changes that are implemented creates a favorable effect within an organization. For example, an organization decide to upgrade the computer system and the staff use, which cause productivity increase with the firm. The second effect is the opposite of the first one, which is known as dysfunction effect. Okay, dysfunction effect may refer to any change that have an unfavorable effect to the organization. For example, a certain that have been implemented has caused productivity to drop and employees to become stressed.
Now, we will be looking at contracts. There are two forms of contracts within a social system, which are economic contracts and psychological contracts. Economic contracts are written terms and conditions of services of rewards such as wages, salary, working hours, and benefits that are given to an employer in return for the time, talent, and energy given to the organization. Economic contracts that are more appealing, such as higher salary and more benefit, may motivate employers to do their work much more efficiently and effectively. Meanwhile, psychological contracts are unwritten contracts that are made unconsciously in addition to the economic contract. It is the mutual understanding between the individual and organization, where the organization expects the individual to provide to aid the organization with their hard work, will the individual expect to receive rewards and benefit for their hard work. For example, the employers agree to give their loyalty, time, and hard work to the organization, and in return they expect the organization to reward them with better job security, benefit, support, and fair treatment. An organization can only function properly if the condition, if both of the contract are honored. If either of these contracts are not met, it will cause several implications towards the organization. For example, the job performance and satisfaction of employees may decrease, which may result to them being distant and separate from the organization. They might also be more resistant to any changes that are implemented by the organization, while employers might have to take corrective or disciplinary action towards their employers, which may cause separation from the rest of the members of the organization. This in turn will cause dysfunction and may even lead to the collapse of an organization.
Okay, now let's look into what social culture is. Social culture is basically the way of life include the system of belief, custom, laws, ritual, and etc. It is the environment of the human created belief, custom, knowledge, and rituals. Social culture which are consistent within a nation is called national culture. People usually learn to depend on their culture. For example, a Malaysian is more comfortable with the social culture within that organization is inherently Malaysian. It is because it gives them more security, stability, and they are able to understand what is happening within that organization and know how to respond to it. People tend to be more awkward and uncomfortable if they are placed within a foreign culture that they are unfamiliar with. This in turn will cause them to become separate from the rest of the organization. So, without culture, there will be a feeling of confusion, insecurity, and anxiety. However, cultures do change, and the way culture changes can be divided into two, which are cultural revolution and cultural evolution. First, we look into cultural revolution. Cultural revolution is the dramatic or sudden change in a culture. The result of this drastic change can result to a culture shock. So what exactly a culture shock is? Culture shock is the feeling of insecurity, confusion, and anxiety caused by a strange or new environment. Usually, people who are experiencing culture shock doesn't know how to act and would lose himself confidence if he acts wrong. Usually, this happens when a person finds themselves within a surrounding that is different from his own culture. For example, a student who raised in a rural village suddenly has to go study in a modern college in Kuala Lumpur, usually suffer from a culture shock due to the drastic change of the environment surrounding him. In organizational setting, culture shock can happen if there are new policies or method implemented by a new manager or CEO that drastically change how the work is previously done within that organization. Now, let's look into cultural evolution. Cultural evolution are changes to the culture that occur gradually and slowly. It's usually the change in environment that surround the employees into the different forms. For example, a much older employee realized that most of his older colleagues are gradually being replaced with much younger workers over the years. The younger workers tend to have different morals, values, and topics of interest than older employees. So, the environment of the organization begin to feel different to him. Cultural evolution can cause disorientation in the behavior pattern of certain people, change in attitudes, moral values, and disorient the thought of some people. There can also be decline or self-confidence and performance due to the different feel of the working environment.
Okay, now we shall talk about roles. So what exactly are roles? Roles are the patterns of actions expected of a person's activities, including others. Roles usually reflects a person's status or power within that social system. However, roles are not only limited within the formal setting. Roles also play an important part in our day-to-day normal life. But each role, depending on the setting, calls for different types of behavior. So, for example, a father can play the role of the leader of his family while he is at home, but at the same time, the same father can be both the leader of his family at home while being a subordinate at his own workplace. Roles are usually guided by role perception. So role perception is how you and the people around you perceive roles. It's basically how people think their roles are supposed to work and how others should act in their roles. For example, a manager perceives his role is to be directing employees and managing them, while the normal employees perceives the manager to be able to punish them if they do not do their work properly. However, roles can also create problems. These problems are commonly known as role conflicts. Role conflicts usually happen when other people have different expectations or perceptions of a person's role. This usually causes the person to find it difficult to meet one set of expectations while rejecting another one. So there are usually 6 types of work conflicts that commonly happen in the workplace. So the first one is intra-sender role conflict. So this conflict usually happens when a person sends a role that is conflicting or inconsistent expectations. So the sender would create the conflict by giving a person roles that are usually opposing with each other. So for example, an employee receives work from his manager that he needs to complete all his work on time. But at the same time, the manager doesn't allow the employee to claim any overtime payments due to the firm's budget reducing policies. So the second type of conflict is known as the inter-sender role conflict. So usually this type of conflict occurs when 2 or more people place incompatible demands on a single person. Usually this happens when 2 persons are asking one person to do 2 jobs at the same time. So for example, the quality control manager of a company is asking the supervisor to reject more of a product to maintain quality. However, at the same time, the production manager wants the supervisor to increase production with fewer rejections. The conflict arises as to which role does the supervisor need to play. By accepting one role, the person might be rejecting another equally important role. So the third type of conflict is known as the inter-role conflict. So the inter-role conflict usually happens when the roles expected of one person is usually in conflict with the other roles that the same person holds. So for example, a son who is taking care of his elderly and sick father is expected to come to work while at the same time that he needs to be at home to take care of his sick father. So the fourth conflict is known as the person-role conflict. This type of conflict usually happens when activities expected of a role holder violates the individual's values and morals. So, for example, a female Muslim receptionist is asked to remove her hijab by the new manager in order to appeal to non-Muslim clients. So the conflict here arises is that by removing her hijab, she is actually violating her own religious beliefs. But if she refuses to remove the hijab, she might be fired from the job. So the fifth conflict is known as role overload. So role overload happens when the role's expectations sent to the role holder is actually compatible, but the expected performance exceeds the amount of time available given to the person performing those activities. For example, an accountant is given a lot of ledgers, multiple ledgers. For example, let's say 10 ledgers that he must balance within a short span of time. So let's say the manager gives him 5 days to balance those books. So the accountant is able to complete the job, but the amount of work that needs to be done is too much to be completed within a short period of time. And finally, the last conflict we have is known as role ambiguity. So role ambiguity is a situation when roles are inadequately defined or unknown to the role holder. So usually the person lacks sufficient information to perform the activities associated with his role. As a result, the role holder doesn't know how to act in the situation that he is facing. For example, an intern is given a complex task by the manager to be completed. The intern who doesn't know how to complete the task is unable to do that task. So what exactly are the impacts of role conflict? Excessive role conflicts will eventually cause many people to become dissatisfied with their jobs. This in turn will lead to lower morale and motivation. Eventually this leads to less organizational commitment and may even lead to no consensus in key decision makings. Job conflicts will also cause an increase in tardiness and absenteeism by the employees. This in turn causes production to decrease within that organization.
Now, we will look into status and status symbols within an organization. So, what is exactly status? Status is the social rank of a person in a group. It is an indication of someone's importance within an organization. Status can be formal, such as a person's position within the organization hierarchy, or informal, such as a person's age or experience depending on the group. So, how can we tell someone apart based on their status? Normally, there will be indicators that will tell us about a person's status within an organization. First, status is based on the rank or position held. A person with a higher position, such as a manager, has a higher status to compare to a lower level employee. Second, based on their educational level. Someone with a PhD is normally higher in status compared to someone who has only diploma. Jobs level can also tell someone's status. For example, someone with an intermediate level job has a higher status within than someone with an entry-level job. You can also tell someone's status through observing a person's abilities or performance. Furthermore, people with advanced job skills and specialized training such as skilled artisans or professional engineers tend to be much more higher in a status. Salary and benefits can also indicate a person's status. A person with a large salary, such as a CEO or president of company, is usually high of status. And finally, you can tell someone's status based on their age or seniority. People such as elders tend to have high status in the most cultures, especially in Malay culture. A person's seniority within an organization is also a status indicator. People who have been working within an organization for decades are higher status compared to employees who have just worked for a couple years. So, why is the person status important within an organization? Status can indicate amount of recognition a person has. It also shows us to honor and respect. People with a higher status tend to be much more respected and honored by other people. It also functions to show us position and power. People with a higher status such as CEO possess more power due to their position in the organization. Status can be motivating factors to the others. People with a lower status will be motivated to do their work when they know that their work can improve their status by advancing through the organizational ranks. Status also function to differentiate the level of management hierarchy. For example, the difference between a manager and supervisor. Thus, it is easier for managers to direct their subordinates based on their status.
So, as a conclusion, for an organization to function properly, it must first function as a well-balanced social system. This is because every within the organization is constantly depending on each other for moral support and direction.
Furthermore, people within the organization must also play according to their assigned role based on their status in order for the organization to work properly. This is to avoid any conflict which may happen that might disrupt the environment within the organization. This is to create an almost perfect organizational system. Thank you for listening and Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.